Hi, good morning, everyone. My name is Steve Moore, and I'm one of the co-founders of the ACI. And it's my pleasure to host today's webinar, which will take place over the next hour. And before I introduce the panel who've agreed to participate and take your questions today, I just wanted to give us a short update in terms of where we are at the moment in terms of our response at the ACI. So obviously, like most organizations in our position, we received notification early last week that this announcement was imminent, and we've had, like most other similar representative organizations, we've had a series of meetings with the with the FSA leading up to the formal announcement itself. What we've done since is we have taken time to seek the advice of our legal, scientific, and regulatory experts who work with us on a day-by-day basis to get their assessment. And yesterday, we issued our first statement regarding the actual report, the joint report from the respective committees that underpin this decision. And we very deliberately want to target questions regarding the nature of how this process was implemented, because we feel that the report itself is opaque in terms of the evidence path that they've taken to reach this decision, and we do want to seek clarity on that. So the statement we put out yesterday provides the substance of a letter that has gone yesterday as well to the most senior people within the FSA, asking them to facilitate a response from the respective committees who've undertaken this review. So if you haven't seen that, it's available on the homepage of our website. It's accessible through our LinkedIn page, and we've also emailed it more widely to our network. I think the second thing to say is that how we respond to this will largely be determined by the response of retailers. And it's pretty clear from the dialogue we've had with retailers since last week that there is some confusion around how to respond to this. And as many of you will know, there's a meeting today with the BRC and the FSA to try to resolve some of the ambiguity and confusions around this. So I think we will have a clear picture tomorrow from the BRC regarding the outcome of this. And I think if the position of the BRC doesn't change this materially the impact on retailers, I think that's one strategy we need to adopt. But if we see a significant amount of products being removed from shelves in the aftermath of today's meeting, we obviously need a different type of strategy. And we're looking at obviously both those possibilities going into the coming days and weeks. What we're also keen to do is to reach out, to use the resources of the ACI, but also to reach out to other organizations who feel similarly affected by this. So we want to be able to be sure that we are bringing as many organizations across the industry together as possible. It seems to me at times like this that you need a clear message. We also need a unified message as well. And if messages become confused, if there's a diverse range of messages and requests of the FSA land, then it's much more difficult for us to get the outcomes I think we need. So we're trying where we can to unify as many of the significant players in this industry as possible. So if you feel you haven't had that kind of dialogue with us up to now and you feel you would benefit from it, do let us know. We can set up a meeting over the next 24 hours with you, but we will be announcing the announcement of a coalition of organisations that we feel together can work to address some of the fundamental challenges this faces in the coming days. But we'd welcome your input into that. But this is a webinar for everybody who's affected by the outcome by last week's announcement. I just want to in turn introduce the panel to you so you'll know who you're speaking to today. So we've got from the industry of Paul Holmes, who's the Director of Science and Innovation at Naturecan, one of the ACI's leading members. We've hired Radcliffe, who's the Supply Chain Director at Cannaray. And we have Sarah Gaunt from the Global Regulatory Services, who provides us with ongoing regulatory advice to us and our members. We've Dr. Paul Duffy, our senior toxicologist, who's been working with the ACI since the announcement of the novel foods process back in 2020. And we have our legal advisor, Dr. Adela Williams, who's been responsible for supporting us with giving us legal advice over the years. So what I'll be doing today is I'll be taking questions that you've submitted. Unfortunately, we couldn't respond to take all the questions that have been submitted today, but what we tried to do is to get questions that seem particularly pertinent at this point, and I'll be inviting our expert panel to respond to those questions. There won't be much chance to do back and to and fro interaction. I don't think really the format allows for it, but do feel free to contact us after this webinar if you've got any further questions or help you require, and we'll do what we can to support you and help you. So I'm going to kick off the question for you, Adela, if I may. And this is a question that's coming from Susie B. And it's, could you explain what the latest information and advice and how this affects the industry as a whole? Adela? Feels like we've lost Adela. So what I'm going to do is
lost Adela. I'll reach out.
Okay, that's fine. Okay, that's fine. Okay, good. Okay, in which case I'll go straight to the industry then as well. So, I mean, can you give us, Paul and then Howard, can you give us an initial view on your impact, what you think impact this is having on your companies and the industry more generally?
Yeah, so I would initially say I think the concern for everybody will be the position of the retailers ultimately and their reaction. That's going to be kind of the biggest effect industry-wide. From our point of view, we are taking the advisory guidance as exactly that for now. We won't be making knee-jerk reactions. We'll wait for a little bit more clarity, but I think it's probably a time to hold your nerve a little bit and not make any rash decisions. Wait to see how it unfolds a little bit. Obviously, there is a statement in there from the FSA as well about there being no acute safety risk for dosages over 10 milligrams. And so as things stand, we are kind of carrying on as we have been until we're informed otherwise.
Yeah, I think from our position, you know, obviously there was a flurry of communication last Thursday. I think since then you feel like the dust is settling. We're reviewing what the FSA's advice is, and really trying to just get some clarity in terms of how we kind of communicate that. Yeah, I think that's the main thing for us. Obviously, we've communicated with our retail customers. There has been limited reaction around that. So really, it feels like a wait and see until we get more clarification, whether it's either from the BRC or from the FSA in terms of what does this mean and what does this mean in terms of our products. Key thing for us really is to try and give confidence around the product and confidence to our retailers and consumers that this is a safe product. And, you know, we're still working with the FSA on our own data, which hasn't been looked at. So that's
we'll come on up. Okay, that's very helpful. Adela, thank you for joining us. Welcome. Adela, I've got a question for you, which is was the proposed quick kickoff question, if you wouldn't mind giving us a general view. So, the questions have been submitted about as follows: could someone explain what is the latest information and advice on how this affects the industry as a whole? Could you give us your snappy take on that?
That's a really difficult question, Steve.
Yeah.
Okay. I mean, the key point is that the advice issued by the FSA is extremely difficult to interpret because we don't really understand the basis for the conclusions that have been reached. So at this stage, I think all you can say is that the FSA are adopting a very cautious approach. They haven't said that products with more than 10 milligrams of CBD should come off the market. And I think it's really a wait and see, so far as I can see from a legal perspective. I don't think there's any immediate action to be taken. Clearly, it's unfortunate. The real question is whether or not this decision can be challenged and or the guidance can be challenged, and further information from the FSA is needed before a decision can be made on that, really.
And where do you think retailers stand right now with regard to this development?
That's a very difficult question again. From a retailer's perspective, a retailer may well be anxious that by continuing to supply products with more than 10 milligrams, they are exposing themselves to the possibility of allegations they are causing harm to consumers. I don't think that would be an accurate conclusion. The FSA is pretty clear that the risks that they are alluding to relate to long-term use, and the fact that they are not suggesting that products with more than 10 milligrams should come off the market would, I hope, be reassurance for retailers, at least in the short term.
Okay, that's super helpful. Thank you. Can I come back to you, Howard, and to Paul? I'll ask this of you, Paul, first. And this is a question that's been submitted by Emily McDonald from Voyager Life. And Paul, do you know if this advice has any implications for other cannabinoids like CBG?
Well, I guess any other ingestible cannabinoids shouldn't be on the UK market at the moment. They need an application for a novel food. As far as we're aware, none have been submitted, and yeah, it would be a very costly and we know now very lengthy process. So yeah, as things stand, CBG topicals, all types of products will be absolutely fine. I think vape products fall into that category as well. But yeah, as things stand, yeah, there shouldn't really be any other cannabinoid ingestible products on the UK market.
Thank you. Howard, any thoughts on that?
Not really, to be honest. You know, all our products are isolate-based CBD products, so for us, it's not really something that's on our radar at the moment.
Okay, cool. Okay, I'm going to move on. Thank you, Howard. Thank you, Paul. And we might come back to you during the course of the next 45 minutes. But Sarah, I've got a number of questions for you that have been submitted on the regulatory issues. Can I kick off with this one, which is about if a brand has currently got a 30 milligram per serving on their label, does the new guidance mean the brand should now relabel with a notice stating that the customer should not exceed 10 mg per day?
No, so the new guidance is for consumers. So the new guidance is directed at consumers, saying you should think about whether you take more than 10 milligrams. It's not directed at industry to make any knee-jerk changes. What we would suggest is looking at your labeling, because there was something else that came out in that report as well. It wasn't just the change in level of CBD that was deemed safe, it was also the change in vulnerable groups. So it would be worth looking at your labeling to see if that vulnerable groups is included and making that labeling change next time you do a labeling run, and potentially put some kind of messaging around the FSA recommends that you don't use more than 10 mgs a day long-term usage. So it's not something that needs to be done immediately. It's not something the FSA are telling you to do immediately, but it's something we would recommend you look at.
Okay. And the follow-up question to that is, what information is available to reassure individuals who have been using high doses of CBD up until now? Will guidance be provided to pharmacists to communicate to consumers?
I'm not entirely sure what guidance the FSA, beyond the statement from COT and the Risk Assessment Committee, I'm not entirely sure whether they've communicated that to pharmacists or people moving forward. This is really consumer advice for consumer products. So the information that we've all seen is the information that's in the public domain.
Okay. Yeah. Okay, this is a bit of advice asked by a representative from a company called Mission C. They're saying that our brand is considering changing the FSA recommended intake from 70 mgs to 10 mgs on our packaging for our CBD oils. We'll also be updating serving sizes and directions for use. Is this the right course of action for us right now?
I think it would be. That would be what I would recommend you do. You look at that and because at the moment, as it stands at the moment, that 70 mg that most people have got on their label really doesn't have any standing anymore. The FSA have changed that advice. So if you do have something that says we recommend you have no more than 70, it doesn't really have any, there's no basis behind that anymore. So next time you do a labeling run, not necessarily withdrawing product from shelves right now, we would recommend you look and reassess that labeling.
Okay. Thank you, Sarah. Thank you, sir. Paul, I'm going to pose the next questions to you, if I may. There's quite a lot of questions that have come in about the tox. We're really into tox. First question is coming from Tim McDonald, who's an online retailer. And he asked, do you know the limitations of the data used in making this decision?
Yeah, thank you, Steve. In terms of limitations of the data that they've used, we don't really have specific detail, and that's one of the things we have asked for clarification on. What we do know is the no adverse effect levels that they reported from the 3 studies that they've used, and use those numbers as points of departure on the dose response curve, if you like. So as such, it's not possible to identify limitations at this stage based upon what was in the report, but we have asked the FSA and to liaise with the COT, the Committee on Toxicity, for clarity on what studies they've actually looked at and why the repeated studies were the ones that we used. So there may be limitations in the data, but it's not visible to us at this point in time.
Okay. And then, so the second question it's coming from FERA Sciences. Does this guidance affect non-isolate products?
Just for clarity, I mean, what the FSA report referred to were CBD products of a certain level of purity. And by that, they meant anything that was equal to or 98 or greater than 98% pure as an ingredient product. Now, most of the isolate products fall into that category, but also synthetic rather than plant-derived CBD could fall into that category. So it's more about purity, although I accept that isolates are the ones, you know, most of the isolate material falls into that level of purity. So that's what they're talking about. The other CBD products that have less than 98% purity, they have stated in their report, have not yet been evaluated. So they haven't made a comment. So the whole 10 milligrams long-term lifetime use advice relates to those products that contain CBD as an ingredient of a high level of purity.
Thank you, Paul. Now, this is the question that most people have submitted and most people who are asking. It's something implicit in the statement from the ACI issued yesterday, but I guess in your view, are pending tox studies going to be considered and ultimately change the recommended ADI? I think that covers just not just pending studies, but studies that have previously been submitted to the ACI in support of novel foods applications.
Yeah, it's a really, really good question. It's difficult to say whether we're talking about pending studies, i.e. studies that are ongoing. I suspect there are pending reviews of studies that have already been completed and have been submitted to the FSA. So in my opinion, I believe that there are more studies that they will take into consideration. And one statement on several occasions in the report, the statement, this is a provisional ADI, implies that should more information be evaluated, they reserve the right to change that ADI. So the answer, based upon what we know, is probably yes, they may revise their position. They may not, following the analysis of other reports. But that opportunity is available to them when they've had a chance to look at more data. At least that's the interpretation we can make. But we have asked, again, the FSA / Committee on Toxicity to clarify their position with respect to that question. Really good question.
Okay, so thank you, Paul. And so here's a more sort of specific question that's been submitted by Ashley Oliver from Olives Oil. And so Ashley's question: most of my products deliver more than 10 mg per dose or drop. Will I have to withdraw these products from sale? Will the focus be on the actual dose per spray of oil? These products are all provisionally approved with the FSA. I think it means validated, pending toxicology reports. This amendment worries me as I'm about to commence a huge national advertising campaign, including TV advertising. Thus, any clarification would be very welcome.
Yeah. Again, an excellent question, and perhaps one that other panel members have touched upon in their replies to other questions, and that is this inference, if you like, from the FSA that their consumer guidance is very much on 10 milligrams per day, long-term or even lifetime consumption. And they even make a point in their report to say that they are not advising that higher levels for shorter periods are unsafe. And that's very clearly stated there. So I think Paul and other members of the panel have pointed that an immediate reaction to try and change your products to comply with this 10 milligram guidance, it may be premature, but I think, I accept your concern, and, one might manage that in a labeling sense, and there are more expert people on the panel than I in that respect, whereby you could advise against 10 milligrams, more than 10 milligrams for a long-term lifetime use, but acceptable higher levels for shorter periods, at least as an interim management of this situation.
Okay, very helpful. Does anyone else in the panel want to come back on that? No? Add to what Paul said?
Yeah, if I could just quickly say, that's something that we've advised for quite a while on some of our blog pages, that it is probably better for consumers to take breaks sometimes from consumption, not just from a safety perspective, but also a tolerance basis, that if you're building up high tolerance over an amount of time and constantly increasing your dosage, you're best to have time off occasionally, let your body reset. And so I think that could be a nice way around this. And if you look at like the likes of Health Canada, for example, that's their guidance, 200 milligrams, no longer than 30 days. And then so advising that break in consumption is a sensible option in this instance.
Yeah, and I would, I was going to say, I would say there's a lot of precedence in many supplements that do say don't take for more than 4 weeks or 2 weeks or whatever you think is the appropriate, just to give that break and that cover.
Sarah, do you think, I think I sent you an example yesterday from a company who's contacted us with a proposed message and things like that. Do you think there's some value in the industry coming together to look at a unified message around this, something that we could take to the FSA in the interim?
I think that would be really powerful, because I think if everyone starts changing it and adding different statements, if you had one statement that says that you can use 10 milligrams over a long period, or use this product but only for a certain length of time, if there was some standardized wording that the industry could agree on, I think that would be really powerful. And then retailers are less likely to take you off your shelves if everybody's saying the same thing.
The only thing I would say is that there is a risk in doing that before you have full information. You don't know the basis for the FSA statement. So if everybody accepts it now and we agree a way to deal with it, we are in a sense embedding that arrangement, and it may be more difficult to row back from that. I think come back to the fact that we're in a very difficult position where we just don't understand why FSA has reached the conclusion that it's reached.
Okay. So we've had a question submitted on the issues for new product development. Are there any implications for new product development in this? Who would like to take that question? Do you want to take that question, Paul? Or Paul Holmes?
Yep. Yeah. So obviously one of the biggest frustrations in the industry, I guess, and it's something that we've seen before in adjacent markets. If you look at vape industry in the US, for example, they had a very similar process whereby the FDA and the CTP, the Centre for Tobacco Products, they grandfather in products that were on the market prior to some kind of arbitrary date. God knows where that date gets pulled from. But they then say you can stay on the market pending approval, and then you go through this lengthy approval process. But any new products then are part of a pre-market approval process, which to me just completely removes any incentive from industry to work on new products that are beneficial for the consumer. If you're placed at the back of this long queue and approvals or applications are looked at chronologically, then you could be waiting 3, 4, 5 years to get that product to market. So it completely removes any incentive for companies to spend that time on R&D. If there was a mechanism put in place whereby they were somehow accelerated through the process or reviewed earlier, that might be beneficial. But as things stand, there's kind of no real benefit to anybody to kind of spend lots of money on R&D for a product that might be 5, 6 years before you can launch it.
Okay. Anyone else want to comment on that?
Yeah, just to reiterate this, and in light of this, at the moment there is you can't reformulate, you can't develop new products. It would all be seen as new to the market, and not you couldn't market it.
Okay. Owen Keenan from Goodrace has a question, which again I can put, I think, to to most people on this panel. It's as follows: what are you hearing from retail partners? Has there been any official statements from the FSA, the BRC, trading standards to give guidance and assurance to retailers? I mean, Howard, can I ask you that question? I mean, have you had anything? Have you seen anything official from any of the retail industry bodies?
Not as yet. You know, we've reached out to all our retail partners. We have had generally positive response, mainly thanks for the proactive communication. And as I say, there's just one retailer that's taken one product off because it's a 30 milligram product. I think what we really need is some clarity around this, and hopefully the conversation between the BRC and the FSA will bring that. I think a lot of people just don't quite know what this means or quite know how to react to this. So there's been this flurry of communication, and it feels like the dust is settling. So I think it's really useful to get some clarity out of the BRC on this.
Yeah, sure. Okay. Okay, we've a number of questions submitted on the Q&A board, which I'm going to take now as well, which hopefully helpful. So, I mean, if you want to use the Q&A board, we have a little bit of time. So if you want to send in any questions, we've got a few more minutes to take questions that are submitted today. So I have a question from Henry Collier. It's, will there be any statements the FSA or ACI could issue to back some of these points up, particularly with regard to help brands reassure retailers? I mean, I think I mentioned earlier that we've had some deliberations with some leading brands in the last few days about a common approach to messaging. And if people feel that that would be of interest to them going forward, I mean, I can share that. I haven't shared it beyond the submission we've had. I think there's been some attempt to look at a generic message that can go on to all products that may be a kind of holding position. We need a wider consultation. So to have a real effect, it would have to be a general support for that across the industry. But I'm happy to kind of facilitate that if it feels that would be appropriate. But is anybody else, any others? Do people feel that they need more guidance directly from the FSA, or do you think we should be expecting? I don't think we can expect that, can we? In the short term.
There's no reason not to ask for it. I certainly think we should be asking for clarification. I see no reason at all not to ask for it, or why we shouldn't expect it.
Okay, well, I think it seems to me that the meeting today with BRC is quite important, really, because the outcome of that meeting, hopefully we'll get a readout of that tomorrow. Well, we'll certainly aim to get a readout of that tomorrow. We're getting statements from both organisations on the record regarding what happened. And I think we've got that really in place to have that tomorrow. I think that'll help inform that position. I mean, my experience of working with these guys over the last 4 years is it's probably easier to bring propositions to them that they can accept or reject, rather than asking them to come up and formulate their own responses. I mean, historically, asking them to initiate anything has always proved to be predictably invalid prevarication. And so again, it's important. I think I just want to emphasize this point. I think the more the industry can come together around unified messages and unified asks at the stage, the better we are to have some success. So I've had those questions come in from Stephen Jones. It's a question probably for you, Paul, which is regarding where did the 16 lab reports from GW go? Should they not have been used with the 3 tox reports that give us the 10 mg ADI?
Yeah, for me or for the other part?
I'm asking for you, Paul Duffy, sorry.
I'm not sure which lab reports you're referring to, but if you mean the reports that were used in support of Epidiolex, the FSA and the COT at this point have said that they don't have access to those reports because it's under data protection, is the first thing. And the second thing they've said is those reports are relevant for CBD as use as a pharmaceutical under medical supervision, and therefore not pertinent. I personally don't agree with that. I think a report on a substance is a report on a substance, but their primary argument is they don't access those reports because they are confidential and they don't have access to them, even though they probably know the outcome of the reports on the basis of the summary basis of approval for Epidiolex, which is available in the public domain.
Okay, thanks for that. Okay, so are there any other questions coming in? Please, if you wouldn't mind submitting any further questions on the Q&A box. And So I'll just go back to just a couple of things. And one is about enforcement. Adela, I mean, someone's asked about who's responsible for enforcement here. The trading standards. What would they be looking for? Do you think the trading standards position has changed?
No, I don't think it has, because the FSA is not saying that that these products should be taken off the market if they exceed 10 milligrams. I think the issue comes back to what you were saying earlier, is that if we were to issue recommendations on daily use of products that are substantially in excess of 10 milligrams, particularly on a long-term basis, we are likely to be exposed to criticism from ASA, etc. But otherwise, I don't think it makes a material difference in the short term.
Okay. So one question that's been submitted about, this is for you, Paul Duffy, which is about what the particular health impacts are associated with long-term CBD use. And yeah, I mean, is it clear what they are? Yeah.
Yeah, that's a really good question to ask, and I don't want to get too technical about this, but the point about safety is it's all about the dose, and the FSA's implication is they don't yet have in their possession long-term usage data that would support a higher than 10 milligram dose, and their argument is based upon the fact that the studies that have been submitted are predominantly, if not entirely, 3 months duration, which is the standard OECD guidance duration for a novel food application. So everybody's compliant with that, but they argue that that is a limited amount of time. And for lifetime use, the data is not available for them to assess the risk. Now, the long-term safety risks that they are particularly concerned about are liver effects, but they're not saying that consumption short term of higher than 10 milligrams will cause liver effects. What they're saying is we are not sure that longer term consumption above 10 milligrams won't have liver effects. And so that it's difficult for me to give you a direct, what are the long-term implications of long-term use? It depends on how much you consume for a long-term use. And that's essentially where the FSA is coming from at this point in time. But they may revise that position around an actual dose as more data becomes available to them, particularly human data.
Paul, do you think they've looked at the Epidiolex data?
They have looked at this. Yeah, they have looked at
that's what's causing their concern, even though, of course,
not necessarily. Most studies, if you go to a high dose, including our own, will show some hepatic effects. Most of them will show hepatic effects over a short term at very, very high doses. The Epidiolex data also shows the same thing. And my understanding of the data that I've seen is it's pretty much consistent across all studies, because it will be consistent across all studies. There's from my particular scientific discipline, it's all about the dose or all about the exposure. Now, there's nothing coming out of the studies we've done that wasn't already known about in Epidiolex. What they're saying is they don't have access to the Epidiolex data, and Epidiolex data does include studies that are much longer in duration, in studies that include lifetime studies in rodents. So there is information out there from a non-clinical and non-human point of view, and there may even be human data out there in terms of post-marketing surveillance, but I don't know if they have access to that, or even if it exists and to what degree. So this is very nebulous, but what they're saying, my interpretation of what they're saying is, we're not sure about the safety over lifetime use at doses above this, because the data isn't available to us at this time. But there is Epidiolex data, you're quite right, but they don't have access to it yet under data protection law.
Okay, so let's just a couple of comments and things that have come in, and just to reiterate certain points I've made already. Elliot Moore submitted a question about is there a world where brands could realistically recommend a dosage beyond 10 mg, but caveat that with a message along the lines of, and he suggested a statement that could be put on. I mean, I think there's definitely an open question about whether we could do something in this at the moment, because I do think that there is. I mean, there's a possibility. If the industry, I can sense a situation where the industry could come together. I mean, Elliot's submitted we put a message saying, in accordance with FSA advice, long-term use of CBD should be restricted to 10 mg per day. So there may be ways in which we could come up in the short term, at least, while we're waiting for this clarification around when the remaining data is going to be assessed by the respective committees and the ADI updated accordingly, where we could look at this. It seems to be there's some consensus around trying to do that. I'll go back to the leading brand, one of the leading brands in the country, who've submitted their idea to us, have designed a label already, and seek their permission to perhaps engage with us further early next week. It does feel to me there's some potential in that. A second, and if you want to follow up on this individually, please do. Secondly, I think Greer from GRS comment around the official position of the FSA is absolutely right. I mean, the official position of the FSA is that there's going to be a consultation with the industry. And in fact, the FSA are actually going to be listening to a recording of this event. And I think we've had contact even in the last hour from the FSA asking for a further meeting to discuss the outcome of this meeting. So I do think there is some beginning to emerge sense in which this process can actually move more quickly than it normally does with the FSA. There does seem to be a genuine willingness to engage. And I hope if you feel that you as an individual company are not getting that level of engagement with the FSA, do let us know, because we can possibly provide you with some guidance based on the information that we're receiving from them, and we'll try as best to update our communications with any relevant information regarding that. There are two questions that have come from Joe Humphreys and from Stephen Jones regarding the Home Office response to the ACMD's legal framework recommendations. Well, we now know that's imminent. We think it's probably going to be in the next 10 days. I think that there's further meetings scheduled with the Home Office next week. We've had more communications this week, which suggests that it's imminent. I don't think that I'm not an expert in this field, and I'll ask others to comment, but I don't think that the FSA's consumer guidance will in any way shape the Home Office response to the ACMD report. But has anybody on any of the panelists have a view on that? I think they'll treat it as a very separate issue. I think they have a recommendation which they needed to accept or reject. So, Adela, have you any thoughts on the Home Office position, or Paul, I'll ask you in a second. Yeah.
I don't think that the Home Office position is going to be altered by what the FSA has just done.
Yeah, Paul?
Yeah, I completely concur with that. I think the Home Office story is all about, it's similar in a way about acceptable consumption of a controlled cannabinoid, but they're setting the levels with relation to that controlled cannabinoid, and it's got nothing to do with CBD.
Yeah, I mean, the indications I've had.
Sorry, Steve. I'm just saying this is just purely guesswork or kind of my feeling on the situation, but I think the timing of the FSA announcement may be somewhat tied to that.
Yeah, it is. Yeah, I agree. It is.
Because it feels like at least an attempt, whether we think it's a misjudged attempt, but from the FSA to finally get to an authorization of a product.
Yeah, it is. Yeah, that's absolutely a message. Yeah, what I feel from the conversations we've had with the FSA over the last week is that there is a desire to see move towards authorizations, and the principal impediment to doing that was the lack of the Home Office response to the ACMD recommendations from December 2021. But I think that is now lifted. I mean, the Home Office are plainly committed to doing that. And I think, the email we got from Home Office this week said they would do it by the end of this month. But I suspect that announcement will be either next week or on Monday the following week. And they've invited organisations to a meeting next week to discuss that. But I think it's basically, so I think it is imminent. And I think that I do think from the conversations we've had there's now no impediment, legal impediment, once that decision has been taken and the appropriate amendments have been made to the Misuse of Drugs Act for these authorisations not to proceed. But yeah, I think you're right. I think your instincts are right, not Paul. Okay, are there any other further questions? I think we've taken most of the questions that we selected from those submitted, and we've answered 6 of the questions that were submitted today. If anyone else got any further questions or whatever, otherwise I'll move to closure, and I'll ask all our panelists just to sum up their feelings going into the next stage of this process. So, any further questions? Okay, so I'm going to start with you, Paul Duffy. Any just final thoughts to leave us with today?
Yeah. I mean, it ties up with the comments of the other panelists as well, and that is, no immediate knee-jerk reactions. The FSA have said this is provisional and it's open up to modification with more information. They've said the recommendation is consumers' safety and about lifetime use and not acute use or short-term use. There are, I don't want to steal anybody else's summing up, but there are labelling opportunities here.
Yep.
That can help you manage the situation while we get clarity from FSA and COT. And, you know, this is not a shutters down announcement. This is what we think, but we're open to modification as more information becomes available. So that's my synopsis of the feeling around this. This isn't a done deal. It's an ongoing emerging situation.
Sure. Thank you. Howard, any final thoughts from you?
I kind of agree with what's been raised there. The thing for us is to settle people's nerves, if you like, within retailers and to give clarity to consumers. And I think the nuance around 10 milligram lifetime, if you like, 70 milligrams per week, and what lifetime consumption looks like, I think there's a real opportunity to get some clarity out there to retailers and consumers that keeps them confident in the product in the short term.
We appreciate that. Thank you, Howard. Adela? Any final thoughts, please?
No, while Paul said he wasn't going to take everybody else's points, he's obviously taken most of mine.
Sorry.
I think all I would say is I keep bleating on. I think we need more clarification from the FSA as to the reasons for what they've done. And I also agree that assuming the 10 milligrams sticks, if it does, it's a labelling issue. It's not anything more serious than that.
Okay, thank you, Adela. Thank you. Sarah?
Yeah, Paul stole all my thunder, so the only thing I would add is that products going through the novel foods route, the FSA have stated that they will look at all the evidence that are submitted within that dossier. So if you're confident in your toxicology data to a higher level, that's what your product will be judged against. So things are still moving through.
Super, thank you. And finally, from Paul Holmes from the industry.
Yeah, I don't think there's much left with what everybody else has said. But just for me, I think we're very intrigued to see if we ever do get any more info on the selection criteria for those studies that have formed the basis of the report. Were they selected because it was a worst case scenario and we're being very conservative? Was it just the first 3 isolate applications in chronological order? Until we get that kind of a bit more background and information, I think that's ultimately what we all want to know.
Okay, lovely. Thank you so much. Well, thanks, Paul. And we're quietly determined to get that information, as you know, from the FSA. So I'd like to thank all our panelists today who've joined us: Sarah, Paul, Adela, Howard, and I think I'm everybody. So thanks a lot for your time today. If you feel these sessions are useful, let us know. We'll host more of them. I think obviously the Home Office announcement is imminent. That's obviously going to create more opportunity for industry engagement. As I say, just to reiterate, keep in touch with our developments. We will share what we can with you as things develop over the coming days. We'll be notifying you if you're not signed up to or registered with us for updates to do so. We'll be providing that, I think, quite frequently over the coming days. I mean, my final thoughts are that 2 things that I've really taken from this is a real determination for everyone to focus on getting this exercise complete based on this full assessment of all the available data. I think there's an urgency to that, and I think I think we can build a common, clear message around that, both across the media, politically, and also in our direct engagements with the regulator and the various relevant committees. I think the second thing that I think there seems to be real promise in working towards some kind of consensus position on labelling in the meantime, if we feel that's going to be helpful. And that's something that I'll take back to my advisory team and possibly emerge with something for next week to see whether there's a broader industry support for that. But in the meantime, as I say, keep your questions coming. Thanks for your time today. Thanks for all your questions. Hopefully we answer them to your satisfaction. And I've nothing else to say, but I wish you a good day. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.